Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to If Deku Was a Saiyan Part 2. Last time on the What If, Izuku met Goku, and after 8 months of training, he became stronger. And right before the entrance exams for UA, Izuku using the power of the Dragon Ball wishes for himself to become a Saiyan. And after that, Izuku took the entrance exams, and he passed it with flying colors. And after taking the quirk assessment test, All Might led Class 1A through a Heroes vs Villains exercise. And the result was, Izuku and Ochako beat Bakugo and Ida. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we begin this what if hours after the Heroes vs Villains exercise, and when it was the end of the day, Izuku noticed Bakugo to leave in a hurry, and he seemed to be in distress, so Izuku quickly put his things into his bag, and he ran after him. And by the time Izuku caught up to Bakugo, they were outside a couple of feet away from the front gates. And when Izuku asked why Bakugo was in a worse mood than normal, Bakugo told him to shut up, and he asked him why did he not tell him, and why has he been holding back on him for so long. And it was obvious to Izuku that Bakugo's pride has been damaged, so he told Bakugo that he hadn't been holding back, and he just met someone that allowed him to get stronger, someone who had faith that he could become a great hero. But after Izuku told him this, Bakugo told him that he is lying to him, since there's no way just training would give him a tail. Then Bakugo told him he accepts defeat this time, but then he told him that he will win next time after he fixes what he messed up. And after he said that, he continued to walk away. And after that, Izuku got fired up to not lose too. So when Izuku got home, he grabbed the book Goku gave him, and he told his mom he was going out. And after a couple of minutes, Izuku got to where he and Goku began to train. And after a couple of seconds of skimming, he remembered the technique that he saw when he was scrolling through the book, called the kamehameha. And once Izuku read on how to do it, he began to practice, which by the end of his training, his results were he can shoot out a beam for around 2 seconds. That is weaker than a punch. And after that, he began to run home. And he's going to keep doing this every day after school. So now we skip to the next day, and when the school day began, Aizawa announced that they will have to decide who will be the 2 reps for the class. And when he announced this, just about everyone in Class 1A began to shout, saying that they should be chosen. And after a couple of minutes, Ida stands up and he said that they should do a vote to see who should be the reps, which everyone agreed to. And when the voting was done, Izuku was chosen to be class rep, while Momo was chosen to be deputy rep. So now we skip to when it was lunch, and while Izuku, Ochako, and Ida were eating, Ochako asked Ida about his family, and it's there that the two learn about Ida's family, and how his older brother is a pro hero in Genium. But before he could go more in depth into his family, an alarm began to ring out throughout the entire cafeteria, and when the alarms began to ring, all of the upperclassmen began to quickly get out of their seats, and they began to dash towards the exit. And when the 3 saw this, they got out of their seats, and they began to try to get the upperclassmen's attention. And after around 5 attempts, they were able to get the attention of a junior, who tells them that the defenses must have been bypassed, and they need to get out in case it's an attack. So the 3 then began to run to the exit, but before they got in, they noticed that the hallway was completely filled, but before they were able to go find another way out, they get pushed in, and while they were halfway through the hallway, the crowd stopped moving, and they began to push and shove, and after some time, Ida was pushed against one of the glass walls, and when he was looking through, he saw President Mike and Aizawa talking to reporters, who seemed to have broken in. So seeing this, he got Ochako's attention, and he told her to make him float, and when she was able to make him float, he used his engines to fly on top of an exit sign. And when he landed, he shouted for the hallway's attention. And when he gets it, he tells them that there aren't any villains. And hearing this, people began to look through the glass walls. And when they saw that Ida was right, they began to calm down, allowing them to get out easily. So now we skip a couple of minutes, and everyone was back in Class 1A. And when Izuku was sure everyone was there, he announced that he will step down and give his title to Ida, because he just showed that he is more of a leader than he is. He then asked Ida if he would accept his role. And after a couple of seconds of thinking, Ida nodded. So now we skip a couple of days, and when class began, Aizawa announced that they will be going on a field trip, and he tells them to get onto the bus that is waiting for them outside once they get dressed in their hero costumes. And Izuku had to wear his PE clothes because his clothes were burned because of the explosion Bakugo fired when he pulled the pin. So now we skip to when Class 1A gets to the USJ, and when they got there, the first person they met was the pro hero 13, who gives them a speech telling them they have impressive quirks, and they could be used to save many lives. But then she told them that the opposite is also true, and that if they are not careful, they can kill many people. Then after she was done with the speech, she led them into the USJ, and when they got in, they closed the doors, and when the doors shut, the lights began to flicker on and off inside, and after a couple of seconds of flickering, a portal opens up in the plaza, and once the portal was fully formed, dozens after dozens of villains began to walk out of it, with the people leading the group being a guy with a hand mask, a giant bird monster, and a guy who was surrounded with the same energy that the portal was made from. And once all the villains walked out of the portal closed, and when Eraser sees that all the villains walked out, he told 13 to get the students out of the USJ. He then ran straight at the group of villains. So then the students in 13 began to run towards the front doors. But before they could get to the doors, the portal villain flew straight towards them. And when he got to them, he seems to stretch himself to the point where he surrounded the entire group. And after some looking at the group, he realized that their target wasn't there. And when he realized this, he muttered under his breath that the target wasn't there. And before he could say anything else, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Izuku tried to attack the villain. But when they tried to attack, their attacks just went through him. Then the portal villain began to teleport the students to random places in the USJ. And when Izuku was able to open his eyes, he found himself underwater. And seeing that he was deep underwater, he tried to get to the surface of the water as fast as he could. But before he was able to get to the surface, Izuku noticed a person with a shark-like quirk. And before he was able to do anything to protect himself, the shark-looking person swam at him, and he went to bite him. But before the villain was able to get to him, Sue landed on the person's head and she jumped on him, launching them many feet down. And while the villain was far away, Sue grabbed Izuku and she dragged him onto a nearby boat. And once Izuku was secured, Sue jumped off the boat and she began to swim around to see if there was any more of their classmates. But after a couple of minutes, she jumped back onto the boat and she found no one. And by the time she came back, the villains began to surround the boat. So seeing this, the two then told each other about their quirks, and after some time they were able to come up with a plan. And by the time they came up with a plan, a villain began to manipulate water into a hand and they were about to hit the boat. So seeing this, Sue grabbed onto Izuku, while Izuku began to channel ki into his hands. And when it was powered up enough, Sue jumped as high as she could while still carrying Izuku. And by the time she jumped, the hand hit the boat, and they were able to avoid it just in time. Then when they were at maximum height, Izuku fired the kamehameha aimed at the villains, which made the villains back up to avoid getting hit. And Izuku aimed it in a way so the two were being fired towards the shore. And by the time they hit the ground, they were a couple of feet away from the shore. And seeing that they were close to the plaza, they swam to it. And when they got to the plaza, they saw Aizawa being held down by the bird monster, with his head to the ground and blood coming from his face. And before anything else could happen, the portal villain went to the guy with the hand mask. And from what Izuku saw, he believed that something bad must have happened in the villain's plan, because the hand mask villain became very upset. And while he was having a temper tantrum, he turned his head and he saw Sue. Then before Sue could react, the hand villain ran to her, and he went to touch her head. But before he made contact, Izuku grabbed the villain's wrist, and he punched him in the gut, launching him a couple of feet away. And once Shigaraki got his breath back, he shouted for Nomu to get Izuku. And before Izuku could react, the bird monster got off of Aizawa, and he is now standing in front of him. And seeing this, Izuku went for the most powerful punch he could muster. But when the fist hit the creature, he didn't flinch at all. Then the monster grabbed Izuku's arm. And seeing this, Sue ran at the monster, and she tried to attack it. But after a couple of hits, the Nomu swatted Sue away, launching Sue a couple of feet into a nearby tree. Then Nomu slammed Izuku to the ground back first. Then Nomu picked up Izuku by both of his arms, and he presented him to Shigaraki, who then began to laugh. Then he put his hand onto Izuku's elbow, which made it start to decay slowly. And after Izuku's elbow skin was completely gone, Shigaraki told Nomu to toss him, which the Nomu did. And when Izuku landed, he hit a tree, and he took damage from the impact, to the point where he felt like he was close to passing out. And seeing that he needed to get rid of the hand mask villain, Izuku put his hands together, and he formed his ki into a ball in his hands. And after 5 seconds, Izuku shot out another kamehameha, aimed at Shigaraki. But before it hit, Nomu ran in front of the beam, and it took the attack head on. And seeing this, Shigaraki began to laugh again. And when he was done, he told Nomu to finish off Izuku. But before he was able to finish his sentence, the doors of the USJ burst open. And when the doors burst open, the group in the plaza looked at the doorway. And when they did, they saw All Might, who ran to the plaza as fast as he could. And when he got to the plaza, he picked up Aizawa, Sue, and Izuku, and he brings them a couple of feet away. He then tells Izuku and Sue, who was also injured, to get Aizawa out of the way. And after All Might told him this, All Might ran back to the plaza and he began to fight the villains. And after a couple of minutes of the two carrying Aizawa, Izuku decided that he needed to help fight the villains. So he dropped Aizawa's legs and he began to run back. And when Izuku got back to the plaza, All Might was sinking into a portal, while holding the Nomu in a suplex. And Bakugo and Kirishima were holding down the portal villain, while Todoroki was freezing the Nomu's right leg. And seeing all this, Shigaraki shouted for Nomu to get up and get Kurogiri. And hearing this, the Nomu broke free from the ice, and when it was freed, its legs were covered with frostbite, but it instantly healed itself, and within the span of a couple of seconds, the Nomu's leg was completely healed. And when it was healed, it ran at Bakugo trying to save Kurogiri. But before he was able to get to Bakugo, Bakugo seemed to have teleported next to Izuku. And when everyone saw that Bakugo was next to Izuku, everyone turned their heads to see where Bakugo was a couple of seconds ago. And when they do, they see All Might. Then All Might and Nomu ran at each other, and when they collided, they began to punch each other, exchanging blows. And after around 299 punches, Nomu starts to get flung into the air. And with one final punch, with all of his energy, All Might launches the Nomu through the roof of the USJ. And after this, All Might tells Shigaraki that he has defeated his Nomu, and because of this, they should give up now, or it'll take them down painfully. while in actuality, All Might was weakened from fighting the Nomu, and he was barely able to keep up his muscle form. And seeing through All Might's lie, Kurogiri tells Shigaraki that All Might is weakened, and that now would be a good time to strike. And hearing this, Shigaraki began to run at All Might, but before he could reach him, Shigaraki got shot multiple times in his arms and legs. And when everyone saw this, they turned their heads towards where the bullets came from, which was the front doors of the USJ. And seeing this, they saw the teachers of UA and Ida. And seeing this, Shigaraki tells Kurogiri to get them out of there. So as quick as they could, they left via a portal. But right before they left, Shigaraki said that this wasn't the end of the league, and that they will come back to attack again. Then the portal closed, so now it's been hours since the attack, and everyone is back at the campus. And because All Might and Izuku were the only ones truly injured besides Aizawa, who was taken to the hospital, and while Izuku was recovering with the help of Recovery Girl, he knows that he felt better and stronger than he did before the attack. So when he got released, Izuku opened up the book Goku gave him again, and in the part about Saiyans, he learned that if he took a good amount of damage, he'd get a power-up when they heal. So now Izuku's power level is 250, so now Izuku's at 1 for all 8% with his weights off. And after Izuku looked this up, he began to walk towards the front gates of UA, and when he got to the front gates, he saw two people waiting for him, which were Ochako and Ida. And when he got to them, they began to walk home together. And this is where I'm going to leave the what if. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.